So Benito Andrea Amilcar Mussolini was an Italian politician, journalist, and dictator. He was dictator of Italy during the fascist era, that is from 1922 until his execution in 1945. He was born on 29th July 1883 in Biography in the province of Forlì, Kingdom of Italy. And during the fascist era, Biography was dubbed Duce's Town and Forlì Duce's City, with pilgrims going to Biography and Forlì to see the birthplace of Mussolini. His father was Alessandro Mussolini, a blacksmith and a socialist political activist. His mother was Rosa Mautani, a deeply religious school teacher. His mother was devout and hardworking, while his father was politically radical and often violent. Mussolini had two younger siblings, Anaredo and Evangi. From childhood, Mussolini dreamed of becoming a great political leader right from a young age. As a child, he was deeply troubled and aggressive. He was expelled from 2 boarding schools for violent behavior. His father named him Benito after a Mexican revolutionary president, Benito, reflecting his political beliefs. Mussolini also gets his middle names from 2 Italian socialists, Andrea Costa and Amilcar Cipriani. He also attended the first 2 years of elementary school in Dovio and then in Biography between 1889 to 1891. At his mother's request, he later entered the Salesian College in Fianza City between 1892 to October 1894. As a child, Mussolini was a troubled and aggressive student. He was expelled after disciplinary problems in 2 boarding schools, including a fight in which he injured an older classmate with a knife. In 1900, Mussolini joined the Italian Socialist Party, and this party believed or was built basing on Marxist principles such as workers' rights and social reforms. They also advocated for parliamentary democracy and legal trade unionism. So this party was anti-war in nature and also supported internationalism. Mussolini received a diploma as an elementary school teacher from the Royal Kadash Male Teachers Training School in 1901. He then briefly taught at the elementary school in Pieve Salceto. After the school year ended, Mussolini immigrated to Switzerland and settled in Lucerne. It is also important to understand that by this time in Italy, military service for all men was compulsory. So Mussolini partly moved to Switzerland to avoid compulsory military service. However, while there he experienced extreme poverty and he lived as a vagrant. While in Switzerland, Mussolini became deeply involved in socialist politics. He was arrested multiple times for inciting strikes and political agitation. He later returned to Italy in 1904 after an amnesty was granted for military deserters. So the government of Italy granted an amnesty for military deserters on condition that they served 2 years in the army. So Mussolini served these 2 years and his service ended in 1906. and actually resumed his career as a teacher, a journalist, as well as a socialist activist. It is important to also understand that Benito Mussolini also briefly lived in Austria, where he was first exposed to nationalist rhetoric and pan-German nationalism. So remember, this was a time of great awakening. So he was deeply influenced by the ideas of philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche and the revolutionary socialist George Sorel. Mussolini later, basing on these ideas, blamed the liberal establishment for Italy's weakness and poverty. So these people saw that Italy was actually backward and weak compared to other European states, and they wanted to make it great again. In the year 1912, Mussolini became a member of the National Directorate of the Italian Socialist Party, and he subsequently became the editor of the party's newspaper called Avanti, and under his leadership, its circulation rose from 20,000 to 100,000. In 1940, because of this, one renowned European scholar called Mussolini, one of the best journalists alive. Remember that World War I broke out in 1914, and initially Mussolini's Socialist Party opposed Italy's intervention into the war. This means that these people actually did not want Italy to join the war. But personally, Mussolini supported Italy's intervention. So because of this, Mussolini was expelled from the Italian party for his pro-war stance of supporting the war, which went against the party's principle. Then he founded his own newspaper, Il Popolo d'Italia, which in English means the people of Italy, to promote nationalist war propaganda. So by establishing this newspaper, Mussolini aimed at, promoting nationalist war propaganda among the Italians, like encouraging them to support the war. Then in 1915, he enlisted in the Italian army. However, in February 1917, he was seriously wounded when a mortar misfired during a training exercise, and he was subsequently hospitalized. While recovering in the hospital, Mussolini received news of Italy's setbacks and was deeply radicalized by this. So Italy was not doing well, and Italy had joined the war on behalf of the Triple Entente. So remember that Italy initially belonged to the Triple Alliance, but when the war began, they fought on the side of the Triple Entente. After the war, Mussolini returned to his hometown in Milan and was frustrated with Italy's, quote, mutilated victory. So now this term mutilated victory was used by radical nationalists who believed that Italy had been cheated of territory despite winning. Now this means that these people actually thought that whereas Italy did a great contribution in the war, it was not considered in rewarding territory. So because of this, these people were not happy at all. Then in March 1919, he founded the Fasci Italian di Combattimento, which literally in English meant Italian Fasces of Combat, at the foundation of the fascist movement. Then these people used a symbol of the fasces. So the fasces was an ancient symbol used in ancient Roman Empire, a bundle of rods as their emblem, representing the strength through unity. So this symbol involved an axe surrounded by a bundle of rods tied onto it, which represented the citizens' the citizens' strong attachment to the state, and that the fascists believed that the major role of the citizen was to obey the state without questioning. That is why the axe represents the state, whereas the rods represented the citizens. Mussolini became highly popular due to his powerful oratory skills and his fierce anti-communist nationalist message. So he also established an armed force or a militant group called the Black Shirts. So the Black Shirt or the Black Shirt squads violently attacked enemies of the fascist party, including socialist, communist, and trade union organizations across Italy, and they, unleashed violence against them, and they controlled the streets. So the Black Shirts, these people, or these youth, followed Benito Mussolini, and they called him the Duce, which means leader. So they could put on black shirts with his portrait or containing his picture, and they could march along the streets, checking out the oppositional elements against the fascist party. In 1921, the Italian Fasces of Combat, or the fascist movement, was transformed into the National Fascist Party. Then, in October 1922, he orchestrated the March on Rome. So the March on Rome, which was a mass mobilization of fascist forces that forced the king to hand him power. So more than 10,000 black-shirted youth marched from the city of Milan to the capital, that is Rome, and told the king of Italy, Victor Emmanuel III, to appoint Mussolini as Italy, or else they are going to cause chaos in the country. So the king accepted and appointed Mussolini. So subsequently, Mussolini was appointed prime minister in 1922. Then by 1925, now in Italy, they followed what we call a constitutional monarchy, where the monarchy existed, but when it is symbolic. So King Victor Emmanuel was the head of government, whereas the prime minister was King Victor Emmanuel was the head of state, whereas the prime minister was the head of government. Now, by 1925, having acquired the power or being appointed the head of government, Mussolini had power over the government, and by 1925 he declared himself the Duce, so which means leader, and literally Italy's absolute ruler. So he declared himself the absolute ruler of Italy and dismantled the constitution and even purged other oppositional elements. So Mussolini used ruthless methods to purge his enemies, including murder, violent attacks, and even intimidation. So by 1925, opposition had disappeared in Italy. So slow but sure, he dismantled Italy's democratic structure and transformed it into a one-party fascist dictatorship. Italy saw massive propaganda campaigns, militarization, and public work projects. So during his time, Italy's economy was boosted rapidly, and also Italy saw massive militarization. So the army advanced with the production of advanced weaponry, and also big projects including factories. For example, it was Mussolini who established the great Fiat Motor Company, that company that manufactures cars. Perhaps I think you have ever seen one in your country, Fiat. So that company was established by Benito Mussolini. In 1936, alongside Hitler and the Empire of Japan, Mussolini formed the Axis Alliance, or the Berlin-Rome-Tokyo Axis. So in this alliance, these three powers agreed to subdue the entire world for themselves to rule. Then remember that World War II had begun in 1939 when Adolf Hitler invaded Poland. So on 10th June 1940, Benito Mussolini declared war on Britain and France, entering World War II on Germany's side. In other words, aiding his allies in the Axis Alliance. By 1941, Italian forces suffered catastrophic defeats in North Africa and Greece, so the Allies actually launched the North African campaign, and they also launched a strategy of depriving the Axis powers of their distant colonies as a way of weakening their reinforcements. And because of this, they launched the North African campaign, in which they landed in Morocco, Libya, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia. So these were formerly Italian territories, and they were taken away, or they were captured, so which weakened Italy. Now, the entrance of the USA into the war and Allied landings in Sicily in 1943 quickly overturned Mussolini's victories and actually contributed to his final blow. It should be remembered that Mussolini had a long-standing contempt for those he considered racially or politically inferior. In 1938, he introduced the racial laws, and these racial laws were modeled after Nazi Germany's Nuremberg laws. So in these laws, he intended to purge the unpure element of the Italian race or the Italian population. So people he deemed unfit to live in Italy or unfit to be Italians, including the disabled, the mad people, political prisoners, people of Rome ancestry, homosexuals, and communists. Now, Mussolini in his final days, in July 1943, the nation or the people of Italy were fed up of the war because Italy had suffered disastrous defeats from the Allied powers, including the deprivation of African or North African territories. So in 1943, the Fascist Grand Council, which was the governing committee of the Fascist Party, voted to remove Mussolini from power. He was subsequently then fired or dismissed by King Victor Emmanuel III, and he was subsequently arrested by the king and imprisoned. However, German forces, under the orders of Adolf Hitler, rescued him in a dramatic raid in September 1943 and installed him as the head of a puppet Italian Social Republic. So when he was imprisoned, the Germans invaded the territory where he had been imprisoned and broke the prison and captured that region, and they declared that region part of Germany and established the Italian Social Republic under the leadership of Benito Mussolini, who received the orders from Adolf Hitler. This means that it was a merely puppet state. Then in 1945, so understand this, that this Italian Social Republic was shortly lived, and in 1945, Allied and Italian partisans. So Italian partisans, these were the Italians who fought against Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler, and the Nazi forces. So the Italian partisans allied with the Allied forces and closed in on northern Italy by April 1945. So Mussolini attempted to flee to Switzerland, disguised in a German army coat. Unfortunately, on 28 April 1945, Mussolini was captured by Italian communist partisans near Lake Como. So remember, he intended to flee with his wife, Chiara Petacci, to Switzerland, but they were unable to get there, so they were captured on the way by the partisans. He and his mistress, Chiara Petacci, were both executed by firing squad on the same day, that is 28th April 1945. Their bodies were taken to Milan and hung upside down in public at the Piazza Loreto as a display of the public humiliation. So people came about to look at these people, at Benito Mussolini and Chiara Petacci's body hanging on the gas station, and they started hurling insults and even hitting stones onto these bodies. So it is important to understand that Mussolini remains one of the most notorious and infamous dictators in modern world history. His military campaigns, colonial conquests, and radical laws and racial laws were responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths across Europe and Africa. So let us look at some of the famous quotations from Benito Mussolini. Benito Mussolini once said, "It is better to live one day as a lion than 100 years as a sheep." He also once said, "The history of saints is mainly the history of insane people. But let me reveal a thing, it's the madmen who have created the greatest work in this world."